Chicago was drowning in darkness. A brutal winter storm tore through the streets, dragging with it icy wind and sheets of snow that slammed into buildings like fists of fury. Streetlights flickered and died. Car alarms wailed in the distance. The wind howled through empty alleyways, carrying with it the kind of cold that could kill. It was the kind of night where even the criminals stayed inside, where the homeless prayed for morning, where the city itself seemed to hold its breath and wait for mercy. But not everyone had the luxury of shelter. A young woman stumbled down the frozen sidewalk, nearly swallowed by the blizzard. Her thin, torn coat flapped violently in the wind, soaked through with melting snow. Ice clung to her eyelashes. Her lips had turned a frightening shade of blue. With each step, her knees buckled slightly, but she refused to fall. On her back, wrapped in a threadbare scarf, was a little girl, no more than 4 years old. The child clung to her mother's shoulders, her small body trembling, her head resting weakly against her mother's neck. Every few seconds, a soft, raspy cough escaped her tiny chest. The mother's arms cradled her daughter's legs, shielding her from the worst of the cold with what little fabric remained. She had given everything to her child. Her gloves, her sweater, even the scarf from her own neck. Now she had nothing left to give but her body heat and her will to survive. Her name was Serena. Serena Blackwood. She looked fragile. Too fragile to be carrying another life through this nightmare. Her long, dark brown hair clung to her face in frozen tangles. Her skin was deathly pale, her cheeks hollow, her green eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something deeper. Fear, desperation, but also defiance. Her boots, split at the soles, slipped on the icy pavement with every step. But her feet dug in, holding her steady. She had no choice. Every breath she took was for her daughter. Every shaking step forward was an act of love. Lightning tore across the sky, briefly illuminating her silhouette. Thin, trembling, but still upright, still fighting. In her mind, a voice from the past echoed, distant but clear. "You're going to be an incredible doctor one day, Serena. You have both the heart and the mind for it." Her professor had said that once, back when she had a scholarship, a future, a dream, back when the world still made sense. Now she had nothing. No roof, no food, no family, no hope. All she had was the little girl on her back. And somehow, impossibly, that was everything. "Just a little further, sweetheart," Serena whispered through cracked, bleeding lips. "We're almost there," but she didn't know where there was. She had been walking for hours. The shelter had turned them away. Full capacity, no room. Sorry, the church was locked. The bus station had security guards who chased the homeless away. She had nowhere left to go. The child stirred against her back. Her voice came out as a broken whisper, barely audible above the howling wind. "Mommy, I'm cold." Serena's heart shattered. She squeezed her daughter's legs tighter. "I know, baby, I know. Mommy's going to find us somewhere warm, I promise." But promises felt hollow when your body was failing, when your vision was blurring, when you couldn't feel your fingers anymore. And then she saw them, headlights. A convoy of black SUVs cut through the blizzard, their lights slicing through the white chaos like knives. They moved with purpose, with power, the kind of vehicles that belonged to people who owned the world. Serena watched them pass, one after another, their engines humming with warmth she could only dream of. The last SUV slowed. Inside, a man sat in the back seat, his face half hidden in shadow. He was returning from a meeting, a negotiation that had ended with blood on someone else's hands. His mind was elsewhere, calculating, planning, when something caught his eye through the frost-covered window. A woman, stumbling through the snow, carrying a child. He leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing. Serena didn't notice the SUV had stopped. She didn't notice anything anymore except the fire in her lungs and the weight on her back and the desperate need to keep moving. One more step. Just one more step. Her foot hit a patch of black ice. The world tilted. She fell hard, twisting her body mid-air to shield her daughter from the frozen ground. Her shoulder hit first, then her hip, then her head. Pain exploded through her body, white, hot, and blinding, but she didn't scream. She couldn't afford to scare her daughter. Instead, she wrapped her arms tighter around the child, curling into a protective ball even as the cold seeped into her bones. "Mommy!" The little girl was crying now, her tiny hands gripping her mother's coat. "Mommy, are you okay? Mommy, please get up." Serena tried. God, she tried. Her fingers scraped against the ice, seeking purchase. Her arms trembled as she pushed herself up, but her body had nothing left to give. She collapsed back onto the frozen pavement, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Snow began to cover them. "Mommy, I'm scared," Rosie whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. Serena pulled her daughter closer, pressing the child's face against her chest to shield her from the wind. Tears froze on her cheeks as she spoke, her voice cracking but steady. "I know, baby. I know you're scared." She kissed her daughter's frozen hair. "But Mommy will never let anything happen to you. Never. Do you hear me? I will never let you go." She meant it. Even if she died here, she would die holding her daughter. She would die fighting. The sound of a car door opening, footsteps crunching through the snow, quick and purposeful. Serena's vision was fading, but she saw the shoes first. Expensive. Italian leather, now ruined by the slush. Then the legs of tailored pants. Then a long, dark coat. And finally, a face. Sharp jaw, dark hair dusted with snowflakes, and eyes, deep brown, almost black, that held something she didn't expect. Not cruelty, not indifference. Concern. The man knelt beside her, his presence blocking the worst of the wind. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked at her, at the child in her arms, at the desperation written across her frozen face. Then his voice came, low and steady, cutting through the howl of the storm. "Can you stand?" Serena tried to answer, but her voice wouldn't come. She could only stare at him, her body shaking violently, her arms locked around her daughter. The man didn't wait for a response. He shrugged off his coat, a coat that probably cost more than everything Serena had ever owned, and draped it over them both. The warmth was immediate, almost painful against her frozen skin. "Enzo," he called over his shoulder, his voice sharp with authority. "Get the car, now." Behind him, another man moved quickly, pulling one of the SUVs closer. The stranger turned back to Serena. His eyes softened, just slightly, as he looked at the child still clinging to her mother's neck. "I'm going to pick you up," he said quietly. "Both of you. Don't fight me," Serena wanted to protest. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse help from a stranger, especially one who radiated power and danger the way this man did. But she had nothing left. No strength, no pride, only her daughter. She nodded once, barely perceptible. The man slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted them both as if they weighed nothing. Serena felt herself being carried through the snow, felt the warmth of his body against her frozen skin, felt her daughter's grip finally loosen just slightly. "Mommy," Rosie whispered, her eyes fluttering with exhaustion. "Is the angel taking us to heaven?" The man looked down at the child, something flickering across his face, something that looked almost like pain. "Not heaven," he said quietly. "Somewhere safe." The SUV door opened. Warm air rushed out. Serena was placed gently onto the heated leather seat, her daughter still in her arms. Blankets appeared from nowhere, wrapping around them both. Someone pressed a bottle of water into her trembling hands. The man slid in beside them, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Drive," he said. The SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the storm behind. Serena wanted to speak, wanted to ask who he was, where they were going, why he had stopped. But exhaustion was pulling her under, dragging her into darkness. The last thing she saw before she lost consciousness was his face, still watching her, still unreadable. The last thing she heard was her daughter's voice, small and sleepy and somehow hopeful. "Thank you, Mr. Angel." And then there was only warmth, and silence, and the distant sound of a heart beginning to beat again. Inside the SUV, Enzo glanced at his boss through the rearview mirror. 20 years he had worked for Dante Moretti. 20 years he had seen the man make deals, break enemies, build an empire from nothing. But he had never seen him pick up a stranger from the street. "Boss," Enzo said carefully. "Who is she?" Dante didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the woman in his arms, on the child curled against her chest, on the way she held her daughter even in unconsciousness, as if letting go was never an option. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost soft. "I don't know." He looked out the window at the storm still raging outside. "But I'm going to find out." If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Every like, every share, every comment helps us bring more moments like this to life. Because sometimes, the darkest storms lead us exactly where we're meant to be. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined road. Bare branches lay heavy with snow. They glittered under the headlights, as if each limb were studded with crushed ice. Serena did not know how long they had been driving. She only remembered, in fragments, warmth, the soft, steady purr of the engine, and a strange sense of safety, the kind she could no longer remember the last time she had felt. When she opened her eyes, The first thing she saw was a massive iron gate. It was slowly swinging open, as though it were welcoming them into a world that belonged to someone else entirely. The car rolled along a long stretch of cobblestone. On both sides, ancient trees stood motionless in the snowy night. And then the mansion appeared. Serena stopped breathing. That was not a house. That was a palace. 3 stories tall, with soaring windows spilling warm golden light. White stone columns held up a majestic archway. Broad steps led to a carved oak door, intricate and commanding. All around, stone statues stood watch, silent bodyguards in the dark. The SUV came to a stop. A door opened, and cold air rushed in, but only for an instant. The man, Dante, stepped out first. Then he turned back and offered his hand. Serena did not move. She held Rosie tight against her chest, her eyes darting everywhere at once. There were too many people. Men in black suits were scattered across the grounds. Their gazes were sharp. Their arms were folded in front of their chests, or their hands were tucked behind their backs in a way Serena knew well. They were carrying something. Her heart kicked and stumbled inside her ribs. Who was this man? Where was she? What had she done? Letting a stranger bring her here? Follow me. Dante's voice came out calm. Not a command, yet not an invitation either. She had no choice. Serena climbed out, Rosie in her arms. Her legs trembled as her feet met the cold stone steps. Rosie was still asleep. Her small, gentle breaths brushed Serena's neck, but now and then, that dry cough still slipped out. Serena followed Dante through the great doors, and stepped into a world she had never imagined she would enter. The main hall was enormous. A massive crystal chandelier hung beneath a high ceiling, pouring shimmering light onto polished marble floors. A spiral staircase of mahogany swept upward. Its railing was carved with delicate patterns. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, and in the corner, a fireplace crackled. Its heat drifted outward, soft and steady. Serena stood frozen at the threshold. She looked down at herself. A coat torn to rags, shoes worn through at the soles, still smeared with dirty snow, hair tangled, stiff with cold. She looked like a beggar who had wandered into a royal court. No, she was a beggar who had wandered into a royal court. Where am I? Her voice shook, breaking as she forced the words out. Who are you? What do you want from me? Dante turned to look at her. His face stayed unreadable, but those dark eyes paused on Rosie, lying still in her mother's arms. Only then did they shift to Serena. You are safe. He said it low and even. Your daughter is safe. That is the only thing you need to know right now. But you need to eat. You need to rest. The little one needs a doctor. Dante cut her off. Not harshly, just firmly. All your other questions can wait until tomorrow morning. Serena wanted to fight him, wanted to scream that she did not need anyone's pity, that she could take care of herself and her daughter, that she did not belong here. But in that moment, Rosie stirred in her arms. The child coughed. A deep cough, wet, frightening. And when Serena pressed her hand to Rosie's forehead, she felt heat rising like flame. She has a fever, Serena whispered. Her voice tightened with panic. A high fever, very high. Dante looked at the child. Then he turned to Enzo, who stood behind him. Call Dr. Sullivan, right now. Enzo nodded, and disappeared into the shadows. Dante faced Serena again, and this time, his voice softened, just a little, but enough for her to hear the difference. She will be fine, I promise. Serena did not know why, but she believed him. Maybe because she was too exhausted to doubt, maybe because she had no other choice, or maybe, just maybe, because in those dark eyes, she saw something she had not seen in anyone for the last 4 years. Honesty. 15 minutes later, the sound of a car engine rolled through the courtyard outside. Serena sat on a red velvet sofa in the living room, holding Rosie close against her body, her eyes never leaving her daughter for even a second. Rosie was awake now, but the clear blue of her eyes had turned dull. Her lids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. Her skin looked paper white, except for the unnatural flush burning on both cheeks. Her coughing was getting worse. Each cough sounded like it was tearing through a small chest, and after every fit, Rosie gasped, struggling, as if there was not enough air left in the world for her to pull in. The living room door opened. A man with salt and pepper hair stepped inside. He was tall and lean, wearing a black coat, carrying a dark brown leather bag. His face was composed. His eyes were sharp, but not cold. And when he saw Serena holding the child, he gave a small nod, as if he understood the situation at once. This is Dr. Sullivan, Dante said from behind him, his voice still low and even, just as before. He will examine your daughter. Dr. Sullivan came closer. He set his bag on the table and lowered himself onto one knee in front of Serena. He looked at her with a steady, reassuring gaze. May I see the little one? Serena nodded, but her arms did not loosen around Rosie. Dr. Sullivan did not rush her. He gently placed his hand on Rosie's forehead, then took a stethoscope from his bag. When he pressed it to the child's chest, his expression slowly tightened. He listened on the left, then on the right, then back to the left again. With every passing second, Serena felt her heart draw tighter, as if something invisible were winding around it. How long has she been coughing like this? Dr. Sullivan asked, his eyes still on Rosie. 2 days, Serena whispered. At first it was only a light cough. I thought it was just a cold. But last night she started to run a fever, and today, her voice caught. She could not finish. Dr. Sullivan nodded. Then he took out a digital thermometer and gently placed it in Rosie's ear. A few seconds later, it beeped. He looked at the number, and Serena saw his eyebrows draw together slightly. 105 degrees. He said, calm but grave. She has pneumonia. A fairly severe case. I can hear wet crackles in both lungs. Serena's world collapsed. Pneumonia. The word struck inside her head like a funeral bell. She knew what pneumonia was. She had once been a medical student. She knew what severe pneumonia could mean for a malnourished child, a 4-year-old with a weak immune system. No, she whispered, her voice shaking. No, no, no. Please, please save my child. I will do anything. Take everything I have. I have nothing, but I will do anything. Please, do not let my child die. Her tears spilled out. Uncontrollable. She had fought for 4 years. She had gone hungry so her daughter could eat. She had slept on the street so her daughter could have a bed and a shelter. She had sacrificed everything, piece by piece, bit by bit, until there was nothing left to give. But she could not lose Rosie. She could not. Rosie was everything she had. Rosie was the only reason she was still alive. Dr. Sullivan placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. Listen to me. This is severe pneumonia, but it can be treated. I am going to start an intravenous line and antibiotics right now. With the right care, she will recover. Serena looked up, her eyes swollen and soaked with tears. Really? You promise? I do not make empty promises, a different voice answered. Serena turned her head. Dante stood near the fireplace. Firelight played across his angular face, carving it into alternating shadow and glow. He had been there the whole time, watching in silence. And now, as he stepped closer, Serena saw something in those dark eyes. Not pity, not curiosity. Understanding, as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. As if he had stood where she stood, had begged for another life, had tasted that numbing fear of nearly losing the person he loved most. She will be fine, Dante said, his voice low and steady as stone. I will make sure of it. Serena stared at him, a stranger, with unreadable eyes and a presence that filled the room. She did not know who he was. She did not know why he was helping her. She did not know what price she would be forced to pay. But in that moment, with Rosie coughing violently in her arms, and Dr. Sullivan preparing his medical supplies, Serena did not care. She only needed her daughter to live. That was all. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you. Dante did not answer. He only nodded once, then turned away, leaving Dr. Sullivan to work. But before he stepped out of the room, he paused at the doorway. He looked back one more time. His gaze lingered on Serena, on the way she clutched her tiny daughter, on the tears still sliding down her hollow cheeks, and for a moment, only a moment, the coldness on his face seemed to melt. Then he walked out, the door closing behind him. But Serena knew he was still somewhere close. She could feel his presence, solid and dependable, like a rock in the middle of a storm. And for the first time in 4 long years, she allowed herself to believe in someone else. It was very late at night. Outside the window, the blizzard still had not stopped screaming. White snow lashed the glass, as if it wanted to break through and force its way inside. But in the warm room on the 2nd floor of the Moretti estate, Serena heard nothing except Rosie's steady breathing and the soft beep of a heart monitor. Dr. Sullivan had set up the IV line and given Rosie antibiotics hours ago. He had told Serena the fever would begin to come down over the next 24 hours. If Rosie's body responded to the medicine, Serena could not sleep. She sat beside the large bed dressed in spotless white sheets, where Rosie lay. Her hand held her daughter's tiny hand in a tight grip. Her thumb traced small circles over the fragile back of that little hand. She was afraid that if she closed her eyes, she would lose the child. She was afraid that if she let go, the child would slip away. She had almost lost her once already. In the blizzard, on frozen streets, in a despair with no exit, she could not let it happen again. This room was more luxurious than anywhere she had ever stayed. A 4-poster bed of glossy black oak, landscape paintings on the walls, a crystal lamp casting a gentle light, a thick fur rug soft beneath her feet. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely foreign. She did not belong here. A soft knock at the door made her flinch. She turned, heart racing, the instinct of someone long accustomed to danger rising fast in her chest. The door opened a crack, and Dante stepped inside. He had changed from the black suit into a dark gray shirt. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms built with strength. In his hands was a wooden tray. On it sat a steaming bowl of soup, a few slices of bread, and a cup of hot tea. Serena stared at him, not understanding why a man like this, a man who clearly had an entire army of servants, would bring food to her himself at 3 a.m. "You have not eaten since you arrived," Dante said, his voice low and gentle, as if he were afraid of waking the sleeping child. "You need to eat, so you will have the strength to care for her." He set the tray on the small table beside the bed. Then he stepped back, keeping his distance. Serena noticed. He did not come closer. He did not invade her space, as if he understood she was frightened and on guard. "I am not hungry," she said softly, her eyes dropping to Rosie. "I cannot take anything more from you. You have already done too much." Dante did not answer right away. He pulled a chair closer and placed it a few steps from Rosie's bed, then sat down. His face was half in light, half in shadow under the dim lamp. Those dark eyes watched Serena with a look she could not read. "This is not for you," he said, his voice steady. "This is so you will have strength for her. She needs you well. If you collapse, who will care for her?" Serena fell silent. His logic was simple and impossible to argue with. She looked at the steaming soup. The scent of stewed chicken and vegetables spread through the air, and her stomach tightened and turned. She had not eaten anything yesterday, maybe not the day before that either. She could not remember when her last real meal had been. Her hand trembled as she reached for the spoon. She lifted a spoonful to her mouth. The warmth slid down her throat, and her eyes burned. She swallowed, then swallowed again, and suddenly, tears ran down her cheeks. She did not know if she was crying from relief, from gratitude, or because this was the first time in so long that someone had cared whether she had eaten. "What is your name?" Dante asked, his voice as light as wind. Serena looked up at him through the veil of tears. "Serena," she whispered. "Serena Blackwood." "Serena," he repeated it, as if memorizing every syllable. "How did you end up out in that storm?" She said nothing. It was a simple question, but the answer was not. 4 years of humiliation, 4 years of struggle, 4 years of betrayal and abandonment could not be wrapped into a few sentences, and she was not sure she could trust this man. He was powerful. He was dangerous. She could feel it in the way other men looked at him, in the way Enzo bowed his head when he spoke to him, in the way this entire estate seemed to orbit around him. Dante seemed to read her hesitation. He did not push. "You do not have to tell me," he said, his voice even. "Not tonight." Serena looked at him, surprised. She was used to being questioned until she broke, used to being forced, used to having to explain her presence in every place she tried to enter. But this man did not do that. He simply sat there, silent, patient, as if he had a lifetime to wait. "I have a son," Dante said suddenly, his eyes turning toward Rosie as she slept. "Luca. He is 7 years old." Serena lifted her gaze, startled. "His mother—" He stopped. For a moment, his eyes darkened. "His mother is gone." Gone. A simple word, and yet it held an entire abyss. Serena looked at him, and for the first time she saw a crack in the cold wall he kept built around himself. She knew that look. She had seen it in the mirror every day for 4 years. The pain of losing, the pain of continuing to live when you no longer want to. "I am sorry," she whispered, because she did not know what else to say. Dante gave a small shake of his head. "Get some rest." He stood, pushing the chair back into place. "Tomorrow morning will be easier." He walked toward the door, then paused at the threshold. "If you need anything, call. Someone will come right away." Then he disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. The door closed softly behind him. Serena watched it, her heart feeling something strange, something she did not dare to name. She looked back at Rosie, then at the bowl of soup on the tray, now half cooled, and she kept eating, one spoonful at a time, while her tears fell quietly. The next morning, weak winter sunlight slipped through a gap in the curtains, laying fragile ribbons of light across the wooden floor. Serena woke with an aching neck, stiff and sore from having dozed off beside Rosie's bed all night. She lifted her head. Her hand was still tightly holding her daughter's hand, and the first thing she did was press her palm to Rosie's forehead. Cooler. The fever had broken. Relief rushed through her so hard it made her breath catch. Tears spilled before she could stop them. Rosie was still weak, her breathing still rasped, faint and rough. but she was no longer burning the way she had been last night. The medicine was working. Rosie was slowly opening her eyes. The clear blue was still dull with sickness, but there was more life in it now. She looked around the unfamiliar room, then looked back at her mother. In a hoarse little voice, she asked where they were, why it was so beautiful. Was this heaven, Mom? Serena smiled through tears and bent to kiss her forehead. Not heaven, sweetheart. This is only a safe place. A kind man is letting us stay here. Rosie nodded faintly, as if she did not have the strength to ask anything more. Just then, a soft knock sounded at the door. Serena turned, thinking it might be a housekeeper or Dr. Sullivan coming to check on Rosie. But when the door cracked open, a small face appeared in the narrow space. It was a boy, about 7 years old, black hair with a gentle curl, large dark brown eyes, exactly like Dante's. He wore navy blue pajamas. In his arms he clutched an old brown teddy bear, worn smooth and frayed with age. He peered into the room with a cautious look, curiosity mixed with hesitation. Luca. Serena remembered Dante mentioning that name last night. His son, 7 years old. His mother was gone. Serena offered a gentle smile, careful not to frighten him. You are Luca, aren't you? The boy nodded shyly, still frozen in the doorway, not daring to step inside. His eyes flicked toward the bed, where Rosie lay watching him with the same quiet curiosity. Luca asked in a small voice who that little girl was. He said he had heard Mr. Enzo say his father had saved 2 people from the blizzard. Serena answered that this was Rosie, her daughter, a 4-year-old. Luca studied Rosie for a long time. His brows drew together, as though he were thinking about something important. Then he walked into the room. Bare feet moved softly over the rug as he came closer to the bed. He asked if the little girl was sick. Serena nodded to confirm it, but added that Rosie would get better, because the doctor had already given her medicine. What happened next stunned Serena completely. Luca placed his teddy bear on the bed, right beside Rosie. He did it carefully, as if he were afraid of hurting her. He spoke with solemn seriousness. This is Bruno. Bruno will protect her. Bruno always chases away nightmares. My mom said so. Before she left, Serena's heart tightened at those words. She looked at the boy, at the old bear that was clearly his most precious thing, at the way he was willing to give away something that mattered so much to a person he had never met. She asked softly if he did not need to keep Bruno. Luca shook his head and said he was big now, 7 years old now. Bruno was needed more by someone else. Rosie reached out and touched the teddy bear. Her blue eyes brightened a little. She whispered, "Thank you. Bruno is so beautiful." And then something miraculous happened. Luca smiled. Not a polite smile, not a forced smile, but a real one. Shy, but sincere. As if the boy had forgotten how to smile a long time ago, and now he was trying to remember. No one in the room realized Dante was standing in the hallway, where the darkness hid his form. He had come to check on Rosie, as he had instructed Dr. Sullivan to report to him. But when he saw Luca in the room, he stopped and watched. He watched his son give Bruno to the unfamiliar little girl. He watched Luca's eyes brighten for the first time in 3 years, and he watched that smile, the smile he had thought was gone forever with Valentina. For 3 years he had tried everything to make Luca happy again, buying the most expensive toys, hiring the best tutors, taking him to the most wonderful places, but the boy stayed quiet, still sad, as if part of his soul had died with his mother. And now, a 4-year-old girl from a blizzard had done what he could not. Dante leaned his back against the hallway wall. His throat tightened. He lifted a hand and rubbed his eyes, and realized they were stinging. Inside the room, Luca was asking Rosie if she liked being told stories. Rosie nodded, a weak smile resting on her lips. The 2 children did not know they were beginning to mend wounds that adults could never reach. 3 days had passed since that fateful night of the blizzard. Rosie had recovered noticeably. The fever was completely gone, and she had started eating again, even though she was still weak. Dr. Sullivan came to examine her every day, and he always left with a satisfied smile. Luca stopped by Rosie's room each morning, bringing comic books and fairy tales to read aloud. The 2 children had grown close, as if they had known each other their whole lives. But while everyone in the estate slowly adjusted to the presence of the mother and child, Serena could not allow herself to sit still. She was used to waking before dawn, used to working without pause just to survive, used to never accepting help without finding some way to give something back. The thought that she was living off another person's kindness, doing nothing in return, gnawed at her each night. That morning, when the clock had only just reached 5 o'clock, and the entire estate still lay buried in sleep, Serena slipped quietly from the bed. She checked on Rosie one last time. The child was sleeping deeply, Bruno clutched tight in her arms. Then Serena opened the door and stepped out in silence. The hallway was dark and still, lit only by the faint glow of nightlights. She followed the stairs down, her footsteps nearly soundless on the thick velvet carpet. The Moretti kitchen made her stop for a moment, stunned. It was spacious, modern, filled with high-end appliances she had only ever seen in magazines. A massive double-door refrigerator, a 6-burner induction cooktop, a white marble island, and polished copper pots and pans hanging neatly from a rack. But Serena did not let herself stare for long. She rolled up her sleeves, opened the refrigerator, and began to gather ingredients: eggs, butter, flour, fresh milk, bacon, cheese. Her hands moved with practiced ease, as if they had never left the restaurant kitchen where she had once worked. She beat the eggs, mixed the batter, fried bacon until it turned crisp, made golden pancakes, warm and fragrant. The scent of melting butter and freshly brewed coffee spread through the kitchen. It slipped into the hallway. It drifted up the staircase. As she was arranging strips of bacon on a plate, footsteps behind her made her turn. A middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform stood in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes were wide with shock. She stared at Serena as if she were looking at a creature from another planet, her mouth stumbling over words as she asked what Serena was doing in there, who had given her permission to enter the kitchen. Serena answered calmly that she only wanted to help. She was not used to doing nothing, and she wanted to repay, at least in part, the help this family had given her and her child. The housekeeper fell silent for a moment. Then she turned away with a puzzled expression. Serena did not care. She kept working. She set the dining table, arranged the plates neatly, poured hot coffee into a carafe. She wanted to prove she was not a burden, that she had value, that she deserved to be here, even if only temporarily. 15 minutes later, another set of footsteps sounded. This time they were heavier, more certain. Serena lifted her head and saw Dante standing in the kitchen doorway. He wore a white shirt, not fully buttoned yet. His sleeves were rolled up. His hair was still slightly damp, as if he had just showered. His dark eyes swept across the kitchen, from the neatly arranged plates of food on the table to the pan that had already been washed and placed on the rack. Then his gaze settled on Serena, standing beside the stove with an apron tied at her waist. "Did you do all of this?" he asked, his voice unable to hide his surprise. Serena lifted her chin. She said she was not used to accepting kindness without doing something in return. She was not the kind of person who could sit back while others served her. She added that if she was going to stay here, then she needed to do something. She was not a burden, and she did not want anyone to think she was a burden. Dante looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. He took a piece of pancake and tried a bite. He chewed slowly, and Serena saw his eyebrows lift slightly. "Good," he said, one simple word, but the way he said it made Serena feel as if she had just been handed something precious. He asked where she had learned to cook. She answered that she had once worked as a kitchen assistant in a small restaurant before she was fired. He did not ask why she was fired. He did not ask anything else. He only nodded and kept eating. But Serena noticed something. The way he looked at her had changed. It was no longer the pitying gaze reserved for someone broken. It was the respectful look given to a person with dignity. Small running footsteps sounded, and Luca appeared at the kitchen doorway with bright eyes. He cried out when he saw the table full of food. He asked if Serena had made it, and why it smelled so good. Serena smiled, her first truly relieved smile since she had arrived here. She asked if he liked pancakes, and told him she would get him more. Luca nodded rapidly, climbed up onto a chair beside his father, and began to eat with real appetite. Dante watched his son. Then he looked at the woman pouring milk for Luca with an ease that made it seem as though she belonged here. And inside him, one question kept echoing. Who was this woman, really? And why could her presence change the air in this house, after only a few short days? That night, when the entire estate had fallen asleep, Dante was still sitting alone in his study on the 3rd floor. The room was dark. Only the fire in the fireplace threw its restless light across the walls, and a small desk lamp cast a pale golden glow. On the glossy black oak desk, beside a stack of documents and a closed laptop, sat a silver picture frame. Dante picked it up. His thumb moved slowly across the glass. In the photograph was a young woman with long black hair, sleek and shining, warm brown eyes, a bright, radiant smile. Valentina, his wife, the woman he had loved more than anyone in the world. The woman who had left 3 years ago, taking a piece of his soul with her. He remembered that day as if it had happened yesterday. Valentina had been 6 months pregnant. Her belly was round, and she always rested her hand there whenever she spoke, as if she were already talking to the child who had not yet been born. They had already chosen names. If it was a girl, Sofia. If it was a boy, Marco. Valentina liked Sofia more. She said that if it was a girl, the baby would have her father's eyes and her mother's smile. That day had been ordinary. Valentina wanted to shop for the baby. She was eager to decorate the nursery, even though Dante had told her he could have other people do it. But she insisted on choosing everything herself. Every little item, every pillow, every stuffed animal. Dante could refuse her nothing, so he let her go with 2 bodyguards while he handled an important meeting. It was the biggest mistake of his life. Marcus Kane, his enemy, had been waiting for an opening like that for a long time. He did not dare face Dante directly, but he knew exactly where Dante's weakness was. He sent men to stop Valentina's car on the way back, in broad daylight, on crowded streets. The 2 bodyguards were shot dead before they could even draw their weapons. And Valentina, she never had a chance. Dante received the call in the middle of the meeting. Enzo's voice trembled on the other end of the line. Something that had never happened in the 20 years Enzo had worked for him. Dante drove to the scene. He broke every traffic law. And when he arrived, she was still there, on the sidewalk, lying in a pool of her own blood. He gathered her into his arms, not caring that blood soaked through his suit. He called her name. He begged her to open her eyes. He promised he would do anything if she would just wake up, but she did not open her eyes. She never opened them again. And the child in her womb, the child they had named, the child they had dreamed of, the child they had loved before it had even been born, left with her. Dante set the frame back down. His hand tightened into a fist. After Valentina's funeral, he changed. The warmth inside him died with her. He became colder, more ruthless, more dangerous than he had ever been. He hunted Marcus Kane and the men who had carried it out. Kane paid for it. He paid dearly. But it did not bring Valentina back. Nothing could bring her back. Luca, his son, had been 4 years old when he lost his mother. The boy asked why his mother did not come home. He asked where she had gone. He asked when she would return. Dante did not know how to answer. He could only hold his son and stay silent, letting tears fall without being able to form a single word. After that, Luca was no longer the lively, joyful boy he had been. He grew quiet, withdrawn, and slowly, the smile disappeared from that innocent face. Dante tried everything to make his son happy again, but he failed. He believed he was not capable of being a good father, not capable of filling the emptiness Valentina had left behind. He made a promise to himself. No one would ever enter his heart again, not because he could no longer love, but because he was too afraid to lose one more time. The study door suddenly swung open, pulling Dante out of the current of memory. Enzo stepped inside, his face as serious as always. He reported that his men had completed the background investigation on the woman, and there were a few interesting things Dante should know. Dante nodded, motioning for Enzo to sit, but before Enzo could speak, Dante turned his head toward the window, where snow was still falling softly in the night. He thought of Serena, of how she had held her child in the blizzard, of those eyes, desperate, but refusing to surrender, of the way she rose early to cook, only to prove she was not a burden. And he thought of this morning, when for the first time in 3 years, he had heard Luca's laughter in the kitchen. What would Valentina want him to do, if she were here? He did not know the answer, but he knew this. Even though his mind warned him to be careful, his heart, the heart he had believed had died 3 years ago, was beginning to beat again, to a new rhythm. A week after Serena and Rosie arrived at the Moretti estate, Luca caught a cold. It was only a mild one, probably from running around in the garden too long in the bitter weather, but he still had a low fever and a dry cough. Dante had to leave for an important meeting that could not be postponed, and even though he called Dr. Sullivan to come and check on the boy, he could not settle his nerves as he prepared to leave the house. Serena saw the worry in his eyes as he stood at the door, looking toward the staircase that led to Luca's room upstairs. She stepped closer. Her voice was gentle, but firm. She told him she would take care of the boy, that he could go in peace, that she knew what to do. Dante looked at her for a long moment, those dark eyes measuring her, as if weighing whether he should trust her at all. Then he nodded. He said, briefly, that he would be back as soon as he could, and he walked out, with Enzo close behind. Serena went up to Luca's room right after that. The boy was lying in bed. His cheeks were flushed with fever. His big brown eyes watched her when she entered. She pulled a chair to the bedside and placed her hand on his forehead to check his temperature. "Only a mild fever," she said softly. "Nothing to worry about. I will stay here with you." Rosie followed her mother into the room. The little girl climbed onto the bed beside Luca, held out Bruno, and told him that Bruno would help him get better, the way Bruno had helped Rosie. Luca gave a weak smile and hugged the old teddy bear close. Serena began caring for him with the steady competence of someone who had been properly trained. She laid a cool, damp cloth across his forehead to bring the fever down. She gave him medicine in the exact dose Dr. Sullivan had prescribed. She made warm lemon water with honey to soothe his sore throat. She stayed by his bed and read stories in a calm, gentle voice. And when the boy drifted off, she remained there, watching over him, checking his forehead now and then. By afternoon, Luke awoke, and the fever had eased. He looked at Serena with eyes still hazy from sleep. Then, suddenly, he asked something that made her go still. "Miss Serena, my mom used to take care of me like that when I was sick. She used to sing me to sleep. Can you sing too?" Serena felt her heart tighten. She looked at the 7-year-old boy, with eyes older than his age, and she understood that behind his quietness lived a longing for his mother that never went away. She nodded. She said she could sing. Then she began, softly, a lullaby her own mother had once sung to her when she was small, before she died. Her voice was not beautiful. It was a little rough, made hoarse by too many sleepless nights and too many hard years, but it was warm, and it was honest. Luca lay still, listening. His eyes did not blink. When the song ended, Serena saw his lips tremble. Then tears began to roll down his cheeks. He cried without sound. His shoulders shook in waves. And it was the first time since Valentina died that Luca allowed himself to cry in front of anyone. Serena said nothing. She only drew the boy into her arms, letting him press his face into her shoulder and weep. She stroked his hair and whispered that it was all right, that he should cry, that letting it out would help, that she was here. Rosie sat beside them. She did not understand what was happening, but instinct made her reach out and take Luca's hand, as if to say he was not alone. They stayed like that for a long time. 3 people in a quiet room, no one speaking. Only the broken, hitching sobs of a 7-year-old boy finally releasing 3 years of grief held inside. When Dante came home that evening, he went straight to Luca's room. He stopped at the doorway when he saw what was inside. His son was asleep. His face was more peaceful than Dante had seen at any time in the last 3 years. Rosie lay curled beside him, holding Bruno, also asleep, and Serena sat in the chair by the bed. Her head leaned to one side. Her eyes were shut tight. One hand still held Luca's hand, as if she were afraid he would have nightmares if she let go. Enzo stood behind Dante and quietly said the housekeeper had reported that the boy had cried that afternoon. Cried a great deal. For the first time since the mistress of the house had died, Dante did not answer. He only stood there, looking at the stranger who had done what he had tried for 3 years and failed to do. She had reached the frozen heart of his son, and in that moment, Dante understood he was standing at a crossroads, one he was not sure he had the courage to step into. Late that night, after he was certain Luca and Rosie were sleeping soundly, Dante went down to his study. Enzo was already waiting there, a thick file in his hands. The 2 men sat across from each other under a pale yellow light, saying nothing for the first few seconds. Then Enzo placed the file on the desk and slid it toward Dante. "I looked into her thoroughly, the way you asked," Enzo said, his voice low and serious. Serena Blackwood, 27 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Boston. Her father died when she was 12. Her mother died when she was 18. No brothers or sisters. No relatives left. Dante opened the file and turned the pages, moving past photographs, documents, and notes. Enzo continued. She used to be a student at Northwestern University. Medical track. Full scholarship. Outstanding academic record. Top of her class for 3 years straight. Her professors all spoke highly of her. They said she had the potential to become an excellent doctor. Dante paused on a photograph. Serena, wearing a white lab coat, standing at the university entrance, a bright smile on her lips. She looked younger, brighter, full of hope. Nothing like the thin, exhausted woman he had pulled from the blizzard. Then what happened? Dante asked, his eyes still on the photograph. Enzo let out a slow breath. This is the strange part. 4 years ago, she suddenly dropped out. No official reason was recorded. One day, she was the most brilliant student in her class. The next day, she vanished from the system as if she had never existed. Dante's brow tightened. Vanished. What do you mean? It means she did not register an address anywhere. No rental contracts. No active bank accounts. No official employment records. Enzo explained. She has lived completely under the radar for the last 4 years. Every job she took was cash only. No paperwork. Dishwashing. Cleaning. Waiting tables. She and her daughter have been drifting from city to city, never staying in one place for long. Dante said nothing. His thoughts churned. A brilliant medical student, dropping out, disappearing without a trace. What could drive someone with that kind of future to abandon everything and live the life of a homeless woman? Is someone the reason she ran? he asked. Enzo nodded slowly. I suspect so, but I have not found who yet. She covered her tracks carefully, as if she is avoiding something, or someone. I need more time to dig deeper. And the child? Dante asked. Who is the father? Enzo shook his head. There is no father's name on the birth certificate. Rosie Blackwood. Born 4 years ago at a small hospital outside Chicago. Serena gave birth alone, no one beside her. And after that, the two of them disappeared from the medical system as well. Dante closed the file and leaned back in his chair. He stared out the window, where darkness lay heavy over the snow-white garden. No criminal record, no ties to crime, no debt, nothing suspicious. Enzo added, she is completely clean, just an unfortunate woman trying to protect her daughter. Dante did not answer immediately. He thought of Serena, of the way she had cared for Luca this afternoon as if he were her own son, of the way she had sung and held his boy while he cried. She was not a threat, but she was hiding something. Keep watching, Dante said at last, his voice even and cold, the way it always was. I want to know who she is running from, or what. And Enzo, he looked straight into the eyes of his right-hand man. If someone is threatening her and the child, I want to know who that person is. Enzo nodded. He stood and left the room. Dante remained alone in the darkness, the file still lying in front of him. He turned back to the page with the photograph of Serena as a student. He stared at that bright smile for a long moment. What happened to you? He whispered to himself. Who took everything from you? That night, Serena had a nightmare. In the dream, she was running through a hallway that never ended. Behind her, shadows chased her. Ahead of her, Rosie's crying echoed from somewhere far away. But Serena could not find her. She screamed her daughter's name. No answer came. The shadows drew closer. Their cold hands touched her shoulders, and a familiar voice rose up, thick with threat. You do not deserve it. You never deserved it. We will take the little girl from you. Serena jolted awake with a scream trapped in her throat. Her whole body was soaked in cold sweat. She sat upright in bed. Her heart raced. Her breath came hard and fast, as if she had just run a marathon. Darkness pressed in around her. For a moment she could not remember where she was. Then she turned her head. Rosie was still asleep beside her. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Serena let out a shaking breath of relief. It was only a nightmare. Only a nightmare. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth, trying to hold back the sob that was rising in her chest. But tears spilled anyway. And even as she tried to be silent, her shoulders trembled in waves. A soft knock at the door made her flinch. She wiped at her tears quickly. But before she could steady herself, the door cracked open. Dante stood in the doorway. His tall frame was outlined by the dim light from the hall. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I heard a noise. Serena shook her head. Her voice trembled as she said it was nothing. Just a nightmare. She told him she was sorry she had woken him. Dante was silent for a moment. Then he stepped into the room, pulled a chair closer, set it a few steps from the bed, and sat down. He did not speak. He did not question her. He did not push. He simply stayed. His presence steady and calm, like a rock in fast-moving water. Serena looked at him, and suddenly she felt tired all the way down to the bone. Tired of having to be strong. Tired of hiding. Tired of enduring everything alone for 4 long years. She did not know why, but she wanted to tell him. Maybe because he had saved her and her daughter. Maybe because he looked at her without pity, and with something closer to respect. Maybe because, for the first time in years, she felt that someone truly wanted to listen. She began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. She told him about her student days, about her dream of becoming a doctor, about the full scholarship she had fought so hard to win. Then she told him about Tyler Harrison. He was the son of a rich and powerful family in Boston. His father was a well-known senator. His mother came from old, prestigious blood. He studied medicine too. He was handsome, charming, sweet. He said he loved her. He proposed. He promised her the world. She believed him. She loved him with the whole, innocent heart of a young woman falling in love for the first time. Then she became pregnant. She told him, happy, believing it would be the beginning of the family life she had always dreamed of. But Tyler vanished. No call. No message. No explanation. One day he was there. The next day it was as if he had never existed. She tried to find him, but the Harrison family met her with a team of lawyers. They threatened her. They said that if she did not disappear, they would destroy her, and they did exactly that. They framed her for cheating on an exam. They took her scholarship away. They had her expelled. They smeared her name in front of professors and classmates, turning her from the top student into a liar in everyone's eyes. They slammed every door in her face, until she could not find a decent job anywhere. And they threatened her again. If she dared to speak the truth, They would take the little girl from her. Serena stopped. Her voice turned bitter and tight. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. She went on. She said she had been running for 4 years. She did not stay anywhere for long. She never registered a permanent address. She never used a bank account, because she was afraid they would find her. She lived on cash jobs. She slept in the cheapest places she could find. She spent her last pennies on her daughter. She only wanted to protect Rosie. That was all she had. Dante did not move while Serena spoke. His face stayed unreadable, but his hand had tightened into a fist on the arm of the chair. When she finished, he asked only one question. His voice was low, soft in volume, yet edged with something dangerous. Tyler Harrison. Serena lifted her head to look at him. In his dark eyes, she saw a spark of fire that made her stomach drop. She shook her head quickly. She pleaded with him not to do anything. She said she only wanted to forget. She only wanted peace with her daughter. Dante looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, slowly. He said he would not do anything unless she asked him to. But Serena could see it anyway. Something in his eyes had shifted. He no longer looked at her with pity. He looked at her with the respect given to a fighter. And in that moment, with darkness wrapped around them, and Rosie still sleeping beside her, Serena felt part of the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. For the first time in 4 years, she had told the truth to someone, and that person did not turn away and leave. 2 weeks after that night of quiet confessions, life inside the Moretti estate slowly found a new rhythm. Rosie was completely well again. Her laughter rang through the house every day. Luca and Rosie had become inseparable. The 7-year-old cared for the 4-year-old as if she were his own little sister. Serena kept waking early to cook, to clean, to look after the children, and no one in the house treated her like a guest anymore. Even Dante had grown used to seeing her every morning in the kitchen, brown hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, hands moving quickly as she prepared breakfast. But that peace was broken one afternoon, when the estate gates opened to an uninvited visitor. Gianna Moretti, Dante's sister, stepped out of a glossy black Mercedes, red high heels, a luxurious fur coat. She was 32 years old, with the sharp beauty the Moretti bloodline carried so well. Long black hair, dark brown eyes, the same as her brother's, and an arrogance she did not bother to hide. Gianna had heard about the strange woman her brother had picked up from the blizzard, and she had come to see for herself. Serena was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Gianna walked in. No one had warned her. She did not know who the elegant woman standing in the doorway was, watching her with a searching, invasive stare. Serena greeted her politely. Gianna did not answer. She only stood there, her gaze sweeping Serena from head to toe, as if judging a cheap item laid out for sale. Then Gianna spoke, her voice cold as ice. "So you are the wandering girl my brother picked up from the gutter." Serena went still at the rudeness of it. She fought to keep her composure and said her name was Serena, and that she was deeply grateful for Mr. Moretti's help. Gianna gave a short, mocking laugh and stepped into the kitchen with slow, threatening steps. "Grateful, or calculating how much you can squeeze out of my brother before you get thrown out. I have seen far too many women like you, pretty, pathetic, always with some tragic story ready to tell. You show up, you lure rich men with tears and weakness, and then you drain them until there is nothing left." Serena felt heat rush into her face. She wanted to argue, wanted to defend her own dignity, but she knew her place in this house. She was only someone being sheltered here. She had no right to speak back to the sister of the man who had saved her. She swallowed the humiliation. Her voice trembled slightly as she said she had no such intention. Her daughter was well now, and she would leave soon. She did not want to trouble anyone. Gianna stepped closer. Her voice dropped lower, but the poison in it remained. "You had better, because if I find out you have any intentions toward my brother, I will personally make sure you and your little girl disappear from here faster than you think. My brother has suffered enough. He does not need one more leech clinging to him and feeding." Tears rose in Serena's eyes, but she bit hard on her lip and refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of this woman. She would not let Gianna see her weakness. She drew breath to answer, but a voice rose from the kitchen doorway. "Aunt Gianna, do not talk to Miss Serena like that." Both women turned. Luca stood there. His small face was flushed with anger. Those brown eyes, the same as his father's and his aunt's, burned bright. He stepped inside and placed himself between Serena and Gianna, even though he only came up to Gianna's waist. He went on, his voice shaking with emotion, but forcing itself to be brave. "Miss Serena is not a bad person. She took care of me when I was sick. She sang me to sleep. She makes the best breakfast I have ever eaten. Do not send her away." Gianna stared at her nephew, stunned. For 3 years, since Valentina died, Luca had barely spoken to anyone but his father. He had been quiet, withdrawn. like a small ghost wandering through a huge estate. And now that boy was standing here, defending a strange woman with all the courage a 7-year-old could hold. Luca reached for Serena's hand and looked up at her with eyes slightly wet. "Miss Serena, can you stay? I do not want you to go. Rosie does not want you to go either." Serena knelt down and pulled the boy into her arms, and at last her tears fell. She whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for protecting me." Gianna stood there. Her face remained cold, but something in her eyes shifted, unsteady for the first time. She did not say anything else. She only turned on her heel and walked out of the kitchen, her high heels clicking against the stone floor. She went to find Dante. She needed to speak to her brother, but deep down, Gianna already knew she had just witnessed something she could not deny. A boy who had been frozen for 3 years had just spoken up to defend a woman, and that meant more than any explanation ever could. After the confrontation with Gianna, Dante called his sister into his study and spoke to her in private. No one knew what was said between them. But when Gianna left that afternoon, the way she looked at Serena was less cold. Even if caution still remained, Dante did not mention what had happened. He only told Serena that she could stay here as long as she wanted, and that no one had the right to send her away except him. In the days that followed, life in the Moretti estate grew warmer in a way no one had expected. Family dinners became a routine. Before, Dante often ate alone in his study, or skipped meals because of work, while Luca ate with the house staff in silence. Now, every night, 4 people sat at the dining table in the grand dining room. Serena cooked, Dante sat at the head of the table, and the 2 children sat across from each other, laughing, competing to tell stories about their day. Laughter filled a room that had once been cold, and the longtime staff exchanged looks of surprise mixed with quiet joy. They had not seen this house feel so alive since the mistress of the home died. One afternoon, Rosie asked Serena if she had colored pencils because she wanted to draw. Serena did not. She almost told her daughter to wait until her mother had money to buy some. But Dante overheard. That night, when he came home, he carried in a high-quality art set. Colored pencils, watercolors, drawing paper, even a small children's easel. Rosie stared with her mouth open. Her blue eyes lit up as if someone had struck a match inside them. She ran to Dante and wrapped her arms around his legs, shouting, "Thank you, Uncle Dante. You are the best." Dante went still for a second, unaccustomed to being hugged like that. Then he slowly bent down and patted her head. His voice turned unusually gentle as he said it was nothing, and if she liked to draw, he would teach her. And so every evening after dinner, Dante sat down beside Rosie and patiently showed her how to mix colors, how to draw simple shapes. Luca joined in too, and the living room became a little art studio. Paper scattered everywhere and children's laughter echoing through the house. Serena stood in the living room doorway, watching the powerful man that all of Chicago feared sitting on the floor. His hands were stained with watercolor. He was patiently teaching her daughter how to draw a flower. Serena's chest tightened with a feeling she did not dare to name. A week later, Dante came home later than usual. Serena had put the children to bed and was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea when she heard the front door open. She stepped out and saw Dante walking in, his footsteps heavier than they should have been. In the dim hallway light, she noticed a dark red streak on his shirt sleeve. "What happened?" she asked, unable to hide her worry. Dante looked at her, then down at his arm as if he had only just noticed it. "Nothing," he said, "just a small scratch." But Serena did not accept that answer. She stepped closer, took his wrist, and gently guided him toward the kitchen. She told him to sit down, then went to get the first aid kit she had seen in the kitchen cabinet earlier. Dante sat on a high stool by the marble island, watching her open the kit with practiced movements. She carefully rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long cut along his forearm, not too deep, but still oozing blood. She did not ask where it came from. She did not ask what he had done, or what he had run into. She simply worked in silence, cleaning the wound with antiseptic, gentle but decisive. Dante watched her, watched the way her brown hair fell forward as she leaned in, watched her small hands, steady and sure, moving with the skill of someone who had once been trained. He asked if she was not curious. Serena lifted her head. Green eyes met dark brown eyes. She said that if he wanted to tell her, he would. It was not her place to demand answers. She only needed to know that he was safe. That answer made Dante go still. It had been a long time since anyone cared whether he was safe or not. People around him feared him, respected him, stayed loyal to him. But no one worried for him like this. No one looked at him as if he were simply a man and not a powerful boss. Serena finished bandaging the cut, wrapping a clean white strip neatly around his forearm. She said it was done. It was not deep enough to need stitches, but he had to keep it clean and change the bandage every day. Then she started to stand. but Dante's hand suddenly closed around her wrist. Serena looked at him, startled. Dante did not speak. He only looked at her for a long moment, with an expression she could not read. Then he let her go. His voice dropped low as he said thank you. 2 simple words, but the way he said them gave them a different weight. Serena nodded, feeling heat rise into her cheeks. She wished him good night, then turned away and walked quickly toward her room. Her heart was racing, and she did not understand why one look from that man was enough to shake her. In the dark kitchen, Dante stayed on the stool, watching her until she disappeared at the top of the stairs. He lifted his hand and touched the clean white bandage she had wrapped around his arm. For the first time in 3 years, the frozen heart inside him was beginning to melt, little by little. While life inside the Moretti estate was growing warmer, beyond those solid walls, darkness was waiting. Marcus Kane, Dante's sworn enemy, had been watching from a distance. 3 years ago, after Valentina was killed, Dante had taken revenge with brutal force. Marcus lost nearly all of his empire. He lost most of his men. He nearly lost his life. But he survived. He ran. He hid. And hour by hour, day by day, he fed his hatred, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Now he was back, stronger, and more dangerous than ever. One afternoon, while Dante sat in his study reviewing financial reports, Enzo walked in with a grave expression. He placed a brown envelope on the desk. Inside were photographs. Dante opened it, and his body went rigid. They were pictures of Serena. Serena walking in the garden with Rosie. Serena standing by the living room window. Serena and Luca sitting on the front steps. All of them taken from far away, from somewhere outside the estate grounds. Enzo reported that his men had caught a stalker near the gate that morning. The man worked for Marcus Kane. He had been watching the estate for at least a week, and he had been sending these photographs back to Marcus. Kane knows about her now, Enzo said, tension tight in his voice. He knows she matters to you. Dante did not answer, but his jaw clenched so hard the muscles stood out. He stared at the photographs, at Serena's face in them, and anger flared up like fire. Marcus had used Valentina to strike him once. He would not get the chance to do it a second time. Triple the guards, Dante ordered, his voice cold as steel. All day and all night. No one comes in or out without my permission. She and the little girl do not leave the estate. Enzo nodded and turned to carry out the order. Dante stayed behind, alone, looking down at the photograph of Serena, smiling at Rosie in the garden. He thought of Valentina. Of that day 3 years ago, the day he received the call that she had been attacked. He thought of the feeling of holding her in her own blood, the helplessness of it, not being able to save her, even though he was the most powerful man in the city. He would not let it happen again. Not to Serena. Not to Rosie. That night, Serena noticed something was different. The number of guards in the house had doubled. Men in black suits stood in every corner, and the air felt so tense it could have been cut with a knife. She meant to ask Dante, but he did not appear at dinner. Luca said his father was busy with something important. Serena did not press, but the instincts of someone who had been running for 4 years told her something was wrong. Late that night, when the house had fallen asleep, Serena went down to the kitchen to get a drink of water, and she found Dante standing alone by the living room window, looking out into the dark garden. She paused in the doorway, not daring to step in, but Dante sensed her. He turned his head, and in the pale moonlight she saw the weariness on his face. "You should go to sleep," he said. "It is late." Serena walked into the living room and stopped a few steps away from him. She asked what was happening, why there were so many guards. Dante was silent for a moment. Then he said someone was watching the house, but she should not worry. He would handle it. She and Rosie would be safe, he promised. Serena looked at him and saw the determination in those dark eyes. She did not ask more. She did not demand an explanation. She only nodded and said she believed him. 3 simple words. They made Dante go still. It had been a long time since anyone had told him they believed him. Not out of fear, and not for their own gain. Serena said it because she truly trusted him, and that warmed his frozen heart a little more. But at the same time, it frightened him, because he knew that if Marcus Kane touched her and her daughter, he would not know what kind of monster he would become. 3 days after that late-night conversation, Serena tried to live normally, even though she knew something was happening outside the walls of the estate. She kept cooking. She kept caring for the 2 children. She forced herself to stay calm in front of Rosie, so the little girl would not worry. But the instincts of someone who had been running for 4 years would not let her truly relax. She noticed the small changes, the guards' sharpened eyes, the way they stood closer to the windows, the way they checked their phones again and again, as if they were waiting for something. One afternoon, Serena stood in the living room and looked out at the garden, blanketed in white snow, and then she saw movement on the far side of the iron gate. She stepped closer to the window and narrowed her eyes, trying to see clearly. A man in a black coat stood outside the gate. In his hand was something long and black, pointed toward the house. It could have been a phone. It could have been a camera. Or it could have been something far worse. Serena's heart began to pound out of control. She backed away from the window. Her spine hit the wall. Her breathing turned fast and shallow. Memories of 4 years of running crashed over her like a flood. Every time she thought she was safe, every time she started to believe she could stop, they found her again. The Harrison family had found her twice before, and both times she had grabbed Rosie and fled into the night. Serena shot up the stairs, running to the room where Rosie was taking her afternoon nap. Rosie lay still, holding Bruno, unaware of the panic swallowing her mother whole. Serena stopped in the doorway. Her hands were shaking. She forced herself to control her breath. She had to stay calm. She had to think. Should she grab Rosie and run? But run where? And what if that man was not sent by the Harrison family at all? Footsteps behind her made her whirl around. Dante stood at the end of the hallway, watching her with a searching stare. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low and steady, as it always was. Serena tried to speak, but her voice shook. She told him about the man outside the gate, about the long black object in his hand, about the fear squeezing the breath from her lungs. She asked if it was someone from the Harrison family. If they had found her. Dante stepped closer. He placed both hands on her shoulders, holding her still. "Look at me," he said. Serena lifted her head. Green eyes filled with tears met dark brown eyes that did not waver. "That is not Harrison," Dante said. "I looked into that family. They are not moving. The man you saw belongs to another group. An enemy of mine, not yours." Serena froze. An enemy of his. She remembered the changes. The increased guards, the tight, strained air in the house, and Dante's words from that night, that someone was watching the estate. "Why are they watching?" she asked. Dante was silent for a moment before he answered. "Because they know you are here," he said. "They know you matter to me, and they will use anything to strike at me. The way they did with my wife 3 years ago." Serena felt the blood rush to her head. She understood now. She understood why Dante looked as if he were carved from sorrow whenever he spoke Valentina's name. Why he said his wife was gone with a voice full of guilt and hate. Valentina had not died from illness or an accident. Valentina had been murdered, and the person who had done it was still out there. Serena stumbled over her words as she asked if she and the little girl were putting Dante and Luca in danger. Dante shook his head, sharp and final. "No," he said. "It is the opposite. I am the one putting you in danger by keeping you here. But I will not let anything happen to you, to Rosie, or to anyone in this house. I failed once. I will not fail again." The way he spoke that last line made Serena understand this was not only a promise, it was an oath, and a man like Dante Moretti did not swear empty oaths. Serena nodded, forcing herself to swallow the fear. She said she would do whatever he told her to do to keep Rosie and Luca safe. She would not leave the estate. She would not do anything foolish. She believed him. Dante looked at her, and in that moment, she saw something soft pass through those eyes that were usually cold. "You are very brave," he said. Serena answered that she had no choice. She was a mother, and mothers had to be strong for their children. Dante did not say anything else. He only nodded and walked away, but his hand lingered on her shoulder for 1 extra second, as if he were trying to give her strength, before he finally let go and left. While Serena and Dante were dealing with the threat of Marcus Kane, a ghost from Serena's past was also moving quietly toward Chicago. Tyler Harrison, the son of Senator Harrison, the man who had abandoned her when she was pregnant 4 years ago, had heard where she was living now. One morning, while Serena was feeding Rosie breakfast in the kitchen, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. When she opened it and read, the blood in her body seemed to freeze solid. The message said that he knew where she was now. He knew about our daughter. He was coming to see her. "And do not think you can hide forever. Tyler." Serena's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She looked at Rosie. The little girl was happily eating pancakes, chocolate sauce smeared at the corners of her mouth, unaware of the storm about to crash down. Serena forced herself to swallow her fear. She forced her face into something that looked normal, so her child would not worry. But inside her, the memories from 4 years ago came rushing back like floodwater. She remembered the day Tyler vanished without a word of goodbye. She remembered the threats from the Harrison family, the way they used money and power to crush her life. She remembered nights of crying alone in a cheap rented room, her hand on the swelling curve of her belly, wondering how she would ever raise this baby. And now he was back. After 4 years of silence, he suddenly wanted to claim her daughter. Serena knew this was not because he loved Rosie. He had never even seen the child. This was about control, about a wounded ego, about him refusing to accept that she could live well without him. She kept it from Dante. She did not want to burden him when he was already facing Marcus Kane. She told herself she could handle it. She could ignore the messages, and Tyler would give up. But she was wrong. 2 days later, while she was sitting in the living room reading to Rosie and Luca, a housekeeper came in and said there was a visitor who wanted to see her. Serena was surprised. She did not know anyone in Chicago outside the people in this house. She told the children to stay where they were, then walked toward the main living room. And when she saw who was standing there, it felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Tyler Harrison. He stood in the middle of the luxurious living room of the Moretti estate. He wore an expensive gray suit. His hair was neatly styled. That familiar smile rested on his mouth, polished and false. He looked more successful, more refined, but his eyes were still the same as they had always been. Cold, calculating. He said, "Hello, Serena." He said it had been a long time. He said she looked so different now. He said living with a rich man really changes a person. Serena stood frozen at the doorway, her heart pounding as if it wanted to break out of her chest. She could not understand how he had gotten inside. Then she remembered. Tyler was a senator's son. He had connections with police and city officials. And maybe the guards did not dare stop someone with a name like his. She forced her voice to stay steady and asked what he wanted. Tyler stepped closer. His eyes swept across the room as if he were pricing every object in it. He said he wanted to see his daughter. He said he had the right to see his child. And he had found the best lawyer to make sure his rights were protected. Rage flared in Serena's chest. She clenched her teeth and said he had given up that right 4 years ago, the day he abandoned her and the unborn child. She said he had no rights to Rosie. She said he was not a father to that little girl, because a father never abandons his child. Tyler gave a thin smile, a smile she had once found charming, and that now made her feel sick. He said the law did not see it that way. He said he had a DNA test proving he was the biological father, and if she did not cooperate, he would take it to court. A homeless mother living off the charity of a notorious mob boss, compared to a respectable senator's family. She could figure out on her own which side the court would choose. Serena felt as if hands had closed around her throat. He knew about Dante. He knew who Dante was, and he was using that knowledge against her. She stumbled over her words as she told him to get out. She told him to never come near her daughter, but Tyler only smiled. He said she would receive a court summons this week, and he advised her to think carefully before doing anything foolish. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Serena standing there, shaking, tears streaming down her face. She had been running for 4 years to protect Rosie from the Harrison family. And now, when she thought she had finally found a safe place, when she thought everything would be all right, the past had caught up with her. She did not know what to do. She did not know who to tell. She only knew one thing. She would never let Tyler Harrison lay a hand on her daughter, even if it cost her her life. That night, Serena could not sleep. She lay beside Rosie, watching the child sleep under the dim nightlight, and her mind spun with 1,000 thoughts. Since Tyler left that afternoon, she had forced herself to act normal in front of everyone. She still cooked dinner. She still smiled at Luca and Rosie. She still spoke with Dante, even though her voice trembled slightly. But inside, she was falling apart. Tyler would not stop. She knew the Harrison family too well. They were powerful, and they never accepted defeat. If Tyler had decided he wanted custody, he would use every method he could to get it. And his threat, that he would use Dante's identity against her, would not leave her mind. She thought about Dante, about everything he had done for her and Rosie for more than a month now. He had saved them from the blizzard. He had given them a place to live. He had treated Rosie. He had protected them from Marcus Kane. He had brought Luca's smile back. He had turned a cold estate into something that felt like a home. And now, because of her, he could be dragged into a legal war with the family of a senator. If Tyler made her connection to Dante public, if he took this into court, Dante's reputation would be damaged. Police would watch him more closely. His enemies would gain another weapon to use against him. And Luca could be caught in the fallout. She could not let that happen. She could not let her presence harm the people who had treated her with such kindness. And there was Marcus Kane, too. If she stayed, she would become Dante's weakness. His enemy already knew about her, had watched her, and would gladly use her to strike at him. She remembered what Dante had said about Valentina, how his wife had been killed simply because she was the person he loved. Serena did not want to become a second Valentina. She did not want Dante to suffer one more time because of her. The decision formed in her chaos at around 2 a.m. She would leave. She would take Rosie far away, to a place no one could find them, and start over. She had done it before, more than once. She could do it again. Serena slowly sat up, careful not to wake Rosie. She took a sheet of paper and a pen from the drawer, sat at the small table by the window, and began to write by pale moonlight. She wrote that she was sorry to leave without saying goodbye. She wrote that she was grateful for everything he had done for her and Rosie, and that she would never forget his kindness. She wrote that she had to go because her presence was putting him and Luca in danger, that things from her past were returning, and she did not want to drag him into it. She asked him not to look for her. She said it was best for everyone, and at the end of the letter, she wrote that he should tell Luca she was sorry, that she and Rosie would remember him always, and that Bruno would always protect him, the way he had protected Rosie. She signed her name at the bottom, and when she set the pen down, tears had already dripped onto the page, blurring the final words. She packed quickly. She did not have much. Only a few changes of clothes Dante had bought for her and Rosie, a little money she had saved from working in earlier days, and Bruno, the teddy bear Luca had given Rosie. She stared at the worn old bear for a long time. Then she decided to leave it behind. Bruno belonged to Luca. She had no right to take it. She woke Rosie gently and whispered that they were going on a trip, that Rosie had to be quiet and good. Rosie was still sleepy and did not ask many questions. She only nodded and let her mother bundle her into warm clothes. Serena lifted her daughter into her arms, slung a small backpack over her shoulder, and looked around the room one last time. A beautiful, warm room, the place where she had slept peacefully for the first time in years. She would miss it. She slipped out of the room and moved like a cat along the dark hallway. She knew there were guards at the front gate, so she chose the back door that led into the garden. From there, she could climb over a low wall at the corner of the property and get out without anyone noticing. The night air cut into her skin when she stepped outside. The snow had stopped, but the ground was still covered in white. She held Rosie tight to her chest, shielding her from the cold wind, and started toward the wall. Before she climbed over, she turned back to look at the mansion one last time. A few windows still glowed with yellow light, and she wondered whether Dante was asleep or awake the way she had been awake through so many nights. She whispered goodbye into the wind. Then she turned away and disappeared into the darkness. She did not know that on the third floor, behind the study window, a shadowed figure was watching her go, and those dark brown eyes, even without seeing clearly in the night, still recognized the familiar shape moving farther and farther away. The next morning, Dante woke with a sense of unease he could not explain. He had seen a figure moving in the garden last night from the study window, but he assumed it was only a guard on patrol. He had been exhausted after a long, tense day, and he decided he would ask about it in the morning. But when he came downstairs at 6 o'clock and did not smell the familiar coffee from the kitchen, when the house was strangely silent, instead of filled with the soft sounds of Serena preparing breakfast the way she did every day, his heart began to beat faster. He moved quickly to Serena and Rosie's room. He knocked. No answer. He pushed the door open and found the room empty. The bed had been neatly made. The closet doors stood open, and the shelves were almost bare. There was no trace of mother and child, except Bruno, the teddy bear, lying alone on the pillow. And on the table by the window, a letter had been folded carefully, with his name written on the outside. Dante picked it up and read every line, and with each sentence, it felt as if someone was cutting into his chest with a knife. She had left. She had left because she believed she was putting him and Luca in danger. She had left without a word, without giving him a chance to explain, without giving him a chance to protect her. He crushed the letter in his fist. Then he opened it again, smoothing it flat, reading it once more as if he could force the words to change. But the lines remained, and the dried tear stains on the paper were a reminder that she had cried while writing them. "Enzo," Dante shouted, his voice echoing through the estate. Enzo appeared within seconds, worry on his face when he saw the expression on his boss's. Dante gave the order in a voice stripped of emotion, cold and sharp as steel. "She left last night. Mobilize everyone. Check every shelter, every bus station, every church, every place a homeless woman might hide. Find her. Find her now." Enzo nodded and disappeared to carry out the command. Dante stood alone in the empty room, looking around at the familiar things that now felt stripped of the warmth of the person who had lived there. He picked up Bruno, the worn old bear Luca had given Rosie, and he understood why Serena had left it behind. She wanted to return what was not hers. She did not want to take anything that belonged to him. Small footsteps ran along the hallway, and Dante turned. Luca stood in the doorway. His hair was tousled from sleep. His eyes were still heavy with it, but they were wide with panic. "Dad, where are Miss Serena and Rosie? Why is the room empty? Why is Bruno here if Rosie is not here?" Dante did not know what to say. He only stood there with the teddy bear in his hand, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly powerless. He was the most powerful man in Chicago. He could make the entire city tremble with a single nod. But he could not keep one woman and one child beside him. Luca stepped into the room, looking around as his fear grew. He ran to the closet and pulled it open, finding it empty. He ran to the bed and threw back the blanket, searching. Then he turned back to Dante, and those dark brown eyes that matched his father's began to fill with red. "They left, didn't they, Dad?" Luca asked, his voice shaking. "Like Mom left. They are not coming back, are they?" The question went through Dante like a blade. He dropped to his knees and pulled his son into his arms, feeling the small body trembling in waves. Luca began to cry, not the quiet, hitching sobs from the last time he cried in Serena's arms. This was the shattered crying of a child losing something precious. He cried for Rosie. He cried for Miss Serena to come back. He cried, asking why people always left without telling him. Dante held his son tightly. His eyes burned, but he did not allow himself to cry. He whispered into Luca's ear that he would find them, that he would bring them home, that he promised. He did not know if he could keep that promise, but he knew he would do anything to try. He handed Luca to the house staff to watch over him. Then he drove out of the estate, joining the search himself. He checked shelter after shelter, church after church, street corner after street corner, where he thought Serena might go. He asked homeless people. He asked street vendors. He asked anyone who might have seen a brown-haired woman carrying a 4-year-old child, but no one knew. No one had seen them. It was as if they had vanished into the air. 12 hours passed, and Dante still did not stop searching. He sat in his car, parked beside a small park covered in snow, staring at swings moving back and forth in the bitter wind. He thought of Valentina, of that night 3 years ago when he had driven through the city searching for her too, and when he found her, it had been too late. He could not let that happen again. He whispered into the darkness, "Please let her be safe. Please let her wait until I find her." And for the first time in many years, Dante Moretti prayed. Serena walked through the entire night and the whole next day, Rosie strapped against her back the way she had been on that fateful blizzard night. She made her way to a small church in the outskirts of Chicago, a place she hoped no one knew, a place where she could shelter for a little while before finding a way to leave the city. The priest was an elderly, kind man. He allowed Serena and Rosie to sleep in the small room for pilgrims behind the church. Rosie was so exhausted she fell asleep the moment her head touched the narrow bed, but Serena could not sleep. She sat, watch over her child, thinking about Dante, about Luca, about the warm estate she had left behind. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if leaving really was the best choice. But every time she remembered Tyler's threat, and the danger Marcus Kane represented, she knew she had no other choice. The next morning, just after she finished feeding Rosie the modest breakfast the priest had brought, the chapel door swung open. Serena lifted her head, and the blood in her body turned to ice. Tyler Harrison stood in the doorway, a triumphant smile on his mouth. He wore an expensive wool coat. His hands were in his pockets. He looked confident and arrogant, as if the world belonged to him. Behind him stood 2 large men in black suits, clearly bodyguards. "You thought you could run, Serena," Tyler said, his voice soaked in mockery. "Did you forget my family has eyes everywhere? A homeless girl carrying a child around is not hard to find." Serena stood up and pulled Rosie behind her. The little girl was trembling, not understanding what was happening, but feeling the danger in the stranger's presence. Serena clenched her teeth and told him to get out, to stay away from her daughter. Tyler laughed loudly and stepped into the room, one measured step at a time. He said it was not only her child, it was his child too, and he had come to take her home, to where she belonged. The Harrison family would give her the best life, the best schools, a bright future. And what did Serena have? She was a homeless woman, a failed mother, someone who could not even give her child a proper roof. Every word was a blade driven into Serena's heart, but she did not step back. She stood tall. She looked straight into his eyes. Her voice shook, but it held. Rosie belonged to her. She had given birth alone, raised her alone for 4 years, while he lived in luxury without caring at all. He had no rights here. Tyler lost patience. He lunged forward, grabbed Serena's arm, and yanked hard enough to make her stumble. "Enough," he roared. "You can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either way, I am taking the girl. Now let go so my men can take her. Or I will call the police and tell them you kidnapped a child." Rosie screamed. The sound ripped through Serena like broken glass. The little girl clung to her mother's legs, crying and begging, saying she was scared, telling her mother not to let that man take her. Serena fought to pull away. She tried to shove Tyler back, but he was too strong. She screamed at him to let go. She screamed at him not to touch her child. And at that moment, an engine sounded outside. A car door slammed. Footsteps came fast and decisive. The chapel door burst open again. Dante walked in, followed by Enzo and 3 other men. He did not look at Tyler. He did not look at Tyler's guards. He went straight to Serena, his dark brown eyes cut to Tyler's hand gripping her arm. And in that instant, his gaze turned so cold the air in the room felt as if it froze. "Let her go," Dante said. His voice was low and even, not loud, but it carried the weight of an order no one dared refuse. Tyler turned, and the moment he saw the man standing in front of him, he faltered. He knew who Dante Moretti was. All of Chicago knew who Dante Moretti was, but Tyler forced himself to appear calm. He said this was his family matter, not involving outsiders. He advised Dante to stay out of it. Dante stepped closer. Now he was directly in front of Tyler, half a head taller, looking down with open contempt. He said Serena was not Tyler's family matter. She is mine, and if you do not let her go in 3 seconds, you will have to learn how to write with your other hand. Tyler stared into Dante's eyes and understood this was not an empty threat. It was a promise. He saw death there. He saw a kind of ruthlessness without limits. A man who would do anything to protect what he claimed as his. Tyler's hand began to shake. He released Serena as if her skin were burning coal. Enzo stepped forward, stopping beside Tyler with a cold smile. Mr. Enzo gently reminded him that his boss was being very generous by giving him the chance to leave, and advised him to accept that generosity before it disappeared. Tyler backed away, face drained white. He stammered that it was not over. He said they would meet again. Then he turned and fled outside, his bodyguards following like dogs with their tails tucked. When the sound of Tyler's engine faded into the distance, Dante finally turned to Serena. She stood trembling, tears streaming down her face, one arm wrapped tight around Rosie, who was sobbing in her mother's embrace. Dante stepped closer. Without a word, he pulled both of them into his arms. Serena collapsed against his chest. A broken sob escaped her, beyond control. She said she was sorry. She said she was sorry for leaving. Sorry for not telling him. Dante did not answer. He only held her tighter, one hand smoothing her hair, one arm supporting Rosie as well. And when Rosie lifted her tear-soaked face and looked at him, calling Uncle Dante in a choked little voice, Dante felt his heart break and mend at the same time. "Let us go home," Dante whispered into Serena's hair. Home. The black SUV rolled smoothly along the snow-covered road, carrying them back to the Moretti estate. Serena sat in the back seat. Rosie had fallen asleep in her arms after crying too much. Dante sat beside her, silent, looking out the window, but his hand rested lightly on the back of her seat, a reassurance that did not need words. Once they were in the car, Serena tried to explain. She tried to tell him why she had left. She told him about Tyler, about the threats, about her fear that her presence would bring more trouble to Dante when he was already dealing with Marcus Kane. She said she did not want to be a burden. She did not want to become his weakness. She did not want Luca to be hurt because of her. Dante listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned to look at her. And in those dark brown eyes was something she had never seen before. He said she was never a burden. He said that from the day she arrived, the house had become a home. Luca had learned how to laugh again, and even he had started to feel something he thought had died 3 years ago. He said he could handle Tyler Harrison. He could handle a senator's family. He could handle anyone who dared touch Serena and Rosie, because that was what he did, because that was who he was, and because she deserved to be protected. Serena looked at him and tears spilled again. Even though she tried to hold them back, she asked why. Why he would do all of this for her, a stranger he had only met by chance in a blizzard. Dante was silent for a moment. Then he lifted his hand, and his fingers gently wiped a tear from her cheek. He said it was because she was no longer a stranger. She was part of this house. She was part of him. The SUV stopped at the estate gate, and when they stepped out, Serena saw Luca standing on the front steps. His eyes were red from crying, but they lit up the moment he saw them. He ran down and threw himself into Serena, wrapping his arms tight around her waist. His voice broke as he asked why she had left, why she had not told him. He said he thought she would never come back, like his mother. Serena knelt down and pulled him into her arms. She whispered that she was sorry. She told him she would not go anywhere again. She promised. Rosie woke when she heard Luca's voice. She reached out and hugged him too. The 2 children clung to each other and cried as if they had been separated for years, not just one night. Dante stood there watching, and a faint smile passed across his mouth. The kind of smile Enzo said he had forgotten how to wear since Valentina died. Heels clicked against the stone steps, and Serena lifted her head. Gianna stood in the doorway. Her face was no longer as cold as it had been the last time. It carried something harder to read. Gianna came down the steps, moved toward Serena, and stopped a few paces away. Serena stood, her instincts rising, ready for mockery or threats. But Gianna did not speak that way. Instead, she looked Serena straight in the eyes and said 2 words Serena never thought she would hear from her. "Welcome home." Serena froze, not sure she had heard correctly. Gianna continued, her voice still proud, but less sharp. She said she had heard what happened at the church. How Serena had stood in front of her daughter even knowing she had no chance against Tyler Harrison. She said she had been wrong to judge Serena as an opportunist. An opportunist would cling to Gianna's brother for protection. An opportunist would not slip away in the middle of the night to avoid bringing danger to others. She said Serena was a brave mother, and Luca needed someone like her in his life. Serena did not know what to say. She only nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Gianna nodded back, then turned to Dante with a rare smile. She told him to hold on to Serena, to not lose her again. Then she turned and went inside, leaving the 4 of them on the steps under the pale gold of late afternoon. Dante moved to Serena's side, standing beside her and the children. He placed a hand on her shoulder. His voice was low and warm. "You heard my sister," he said. "This is your home now, yours and Rosie's." Serena lifted her face to him, and for the first time since she had stepped into this estate, she allowed herself to believe she belonged here. She smiled, her first smile after 2 turbulent days, and said, "Thank you for everything." Dante did not answer. He only tightened his hand gently on her shoulder, and together they walked into the house. Luca held Rosie's hand. Bruno was retrieved from the room and handed back to the little girl, and the laughter of the 2 children rose again through the halls of the Moretti estate. That night, as they sat together around the dinner table, Dante looked around and realized something. For the first time since Valentina died, this house truly felt like a family. A year later, spring had arrived in Chicago, sweeping away the last traces of the harsh winter. The trees in the Moretti estate garden were budding and turning green. Tulips of every color bloomed along the path, and each morning, birdsong drifted through the air like a living symphony. Serena stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the pure white graduation gown. She could not believe this day had finally come. After so many years of interruption, after so many hardships that had once felt impossible to survive, she had completed her nursing program, and today was graduation day. Dante had kept his promise. He did not only protect her and Rosie from Tyler Harrison, he also helped her return to school. After Dante intervened, the Harrison family fell completely silent. Tyler never appeared again. Serena never asked what Dante did, and Dante never told her. But she knew that for a man like Dante Moretti, there was no problem that could not be handled. Marcus Kane had been handled too. Enzo said only that Marcus would no longer be a threat, and Serena did not need the details. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she felt truly safe. The graduation ceremony took place in the morning. When Serena stepped onto the stage to receive her diploma, she looked down at the audience and saw them there. Dante, in an elegant black suit, Luca and Rosie seated on either side of him. Both children waved and cheered when her name was called. Gianna was there too, sitting beside Enzo, and when Serena's eyes met hers, that proud woman gave a small nod and a faint smile. Tears spilled down Serena's cheeks as she held the diploma in her hands. She had done it. After everything, she had done it. That afternoon, they held a picnic in the garden of the estate to celebrate. A checkered blanket was spread over the lush green grass. The picnic basket was packed with delicious food, and the late afternoon sunlight poured over everything like honey. Luca and Rosie chased each other around the garden, their laughter ringing out like the clearest notes of... Rosie was 5 now, healthy and bursting with energy, with no trace left of the fragile little girl who had once coughed and struggled through that blizzard night. Luca was 8 now, and he was nothing like the quiet, sorrowful child Serena had first met. He laughed more, he spoke more, and he cared for Rosie as if she were his own little sister. Serena sat on the blanket, leaning back against Dante, watching the 2 children play. A strange peace settled in her chest, a peace she had once believed she would never have. "Are you happy?" Dante asked, his voice warm in her ear. She turned to look at him and smiled. "I am happy. For the first time in my life, I am truly happy." They did not marry. There was no engagement, no diamond ring, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that they were together, and with each passing day, the bond between them grew deeper. Just then, Rosie came running over, cheeks flushed from play, eyes bright and sparkling. She climbed into Dante's lap, wrapped her arms around his neck, then lifted her face and looked at him with clear blue eyes. "Uncle Dante," she said, her voice innocent and bright. "Can I call you Dad? The way Luca calls you." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Serena stopped breathing. Her heart beat so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked at Dante and saw his dark brown eyes shining with something she could only call emotion. Dante looked down at the little girl in his arms, then looked at Serena as if asking permission. Serena nodded. Tears were already sliding down her cheeks before she even realized they were there. Dante looked back at Rosie, and his voice trembled slightly as he answered, "You can call me Dad, little angel, if you want to." Rosie squealed with joy. She hugged Dante tighter and kissed his cheek. "I love you, Dad. You are my hero." Luca ran over at that moment. When he heard Rosie say Dad, he stopped and looked at Serena with hesitation. Then he came closer, sat down beside her, and took her hand. "Miss Serena," Luca said, his small voice soft and shaking. "Can I call you Mom? I know my mom is in heaven, but I do not think she will be angry if I have another mom here." Serena cried out loud. She pulled the boy into her arms and held him tight. She told him yes, he could call her Mom. She said she would love him like her own son. She promised. The four of them sat together on the picnic blanket under the warm golden light, holding one another like a real family. No shared blood, no legal papers, but they were family. A family formed from suffering, from loss, and from unconditional love. Serena lifted her eyes to the blue sky and whispered inside her heart, "Some storms do not come to destroy us. They come to carry away what does not belong to us, and to bring us to where we truly belong." Dante found her on the worst blizzard night of her life. He did not only save her, he gave her a family, and inside his world of darkness and danger, she found her light. Because sometimes, the safest place is not the place where there is no storm. It is the place where someone loves you enough to stand in the rain with you. This story brings us a deep lesson about the strength of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Even if life pushes us into circumstances that seem the most hopeless, as long as we do not give up, as long as we keep walking for the people we love, light will appear where we least expect it. Serena lost everything, but she never lost her love for her daughter, and that love guided her to the family she deserved to have. If this story touched your heart, please take a second to subscribe to our channel, press like, and share this video with the people you love. Every subscription, every like, every share is a great encouragement that helps us continue bringing meaningful stories to you each day. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever faced storms in your own life? And how did you make it through? We truly hope to hear your heartfelt thoughts in the comments below. Every story you share is precious, and we believe that when we share, we spread more love and hope into this world together. Thank you sincerely for taking the time to follow this story. We wish you and your loved ones good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Remember this: no matter how fierce the storm is, there will always be someone willing to stand beside you. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.